Our mission at Resilient Advisor is to have a significant impact on the retirement crisis by educating and empowering financial advisors to better serve their clients. We bring you industry thought leaders and experts to help you make a difference in the lives of your clients.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Resilient Advisor. My name is Jay Coulter, and joining me today is Jillian DelSignore. She is a managing director and head of ETFs and indexing at FLX Distribution. She is a co-author of a report titled The Changing Landscape of ETF Distribution. They did that in partnership with Blackwater Search and Advisory. Jillian, thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, Jay.
All right, let's get right to it. So what was the scope of the research for this report?
Yeah, we actually spent time with a little more than 30 heads of distribution and heads of businesses from across the ETF industry. As much as 2020 has changed all of us in the way that we work, we really wanted to take an opportunity to meet with some of these heads of the business and heads of distribution to really understand from their perspective what had changed through 2020. And not only what had changed, what did they think was going to stay, right? Where had we seen this changing face of distribution, as we called it, within the ETF industry, and really give us some perspective on those that navigated it the most effectively. And then therefore, what do they think was going to stick around as we moved into 2021 and beyond? Because I think, personally, and they agreed as well, COVID really just accelerated changes that were already coming. And I think that was sort of, broadly speaking, what a lot of people had to think.
Yeah. So as a reformed wholesaler myself 15 years ago, I cannot imagine how much it's changed. And we're going to talk about some of those dynamics. Like you, we saw it coming even before the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. Our audience are financial advisors. They like to partner with good distribution partners. And the role of the wholesaler had already been changing. The old steak and whiskey wholesaler was really no more, and you had to come and really bring A game in order to get any attention from these advisors. Your report really speaks to how those changes are going to help these financial advisors going forward. So what are some of the high points as it relates to you as you think through the positive changes for advisors?
So I think about it as bringing resources and research. So if you looked at it, you talk to those ETF issuers that really had been the most successful through 2020. I think they were ones that were doing two things. One was they were not just bringing product, right? I think every advisor that's listening here could probably tell you they don't need more product, right? There's plenty out there to pick from. They need better educated and supported in how to use that product, how to help their clients, how to help their businesses. And so that's really, if you think about it, especially early on and when all of us thought we were going to be home for just a few weeks, right? Not 18 months or whatever it's been now, they weren't leading with product. They were leading with research. They were saying, this is what we're thinking about the markets. This is what we're thinking about the situation that we're currently in. And those really were the ones that were incredibly successful, bringing that value to the advisors. I think also those that are using data. Those that are using data to help a better client experience. So if they can better target who they're talking to about what they're talking with them about, allows them to really have a much more engaged, relevant conversation with advisors. Think about how much better it would be if you, as an advisor, the information that was coming at you was relevant to your business because we knew certain things about how you ran your business and how you manage client portfolios. And so I think it's bringing resources and research and doing so in a targeted way that really hits home with what they're interested in learning about and hearing about. And I think the role of the wholesaler, which I think, frankly, that term has sort of gone by the wayside, I think, of these sales professionals has become much more consultant and far less very sort of wholesale sales focused. Now, certainly we're all still selling, don't get me wrong, but being much more consultant to an advisor's business is really what's driving us into the future.
It's the only way to build long-term relationships with good, successful advisors.
Yes.
Before I left distribution, the term hybrid was not really well received. It's a role that you progressed in your career from the internal desk to maybe a hybrid to external, or even worse, you work for a company that went through a downsizing and everybody became hybrid. I have to think that has changed dramatically. What are your thoughts around the hybrid distribution model today?
That's such a great question. I was a hybrid at one point in my career, so I can appreciate that. It was that stepping stone, right? I went internal to hybrid to external. But now if you think about it, I mean, back to March of 2020, everyone all of a sudden became an internal, right? Everybody, very, very, very senior external salespeople were all of a sudden having to reshape their businesses. And those that were the most successful were those that were willing to adapt and use technology to their benefit. And I, from previous firms that I've worked with, many of them have developed these teams that actually never left the desk. So these are individuals that are external salespeople who manage territories, but did so from a desk and from a computer exclusively. And this is before COVID, and this even really became a thing. It was more WebExes. And now, of course, we all do Zoom meetings. People have never wanted to see our faces as much. They never, didn't have to used to see everybody's faces all the time. It was much more conference calls, but clearly that has evolved. And so I think what they've noticed is, or we've noticed collectively, is you can have a lot of impact doing business this way. It was this interesting transition during COVID where you went from saying, okay, it's April, it's May, this is clearly going to become a longer term situation for all of us. We have to get back to business. And so you start to realize that role of, whether we call it a hybrid, whatever we want to call it, someone who is largely doing virtual communication and virtual sales can be incredibly productive. And you think about just the fact that you are removing territorial boundaries and you can reach and be so much more effective in a day. I think when I was covering RIAs years back, you could do 3-4 meetings a day because you've got all the commuting time in between. It's different if you're covering wires, but all this commuting time, that all of a sudden was gone. It's exhausting for us doing them, right? Because you're going Zoom to Zoom to Zoom to Zoom, but you can be so much more effective. I think truly are gone are the days where you're flying for 1 or 2 meetings. It's not efficient. It's not cost effective. And so this transition to where you can have more senior salespeople sitting on a desk, it allows for more work-life balance. Frankly, I think what we're going to see is more women in the sales roles, which I would love to see, because you're able to be very effective in covering your clients, but not necessarily having to be on the road all the time. To your point, whiskey and steak dinners are certainly a thing of the past. I do think golf has certainly resurfaced in a pretty meaningful way. That's all people could do for quite some time as we were all transitioning back into seeing people in person. But yeah, I think as you think about removing those territorial barriers, what we are seeing is almost like a market leader structure where you do have folks that are out in the field covering major metros, very large firms, and then you have those that work maybe with the long tail advisors where you're reaching them more digitally, or you are reaching geographically remote areas. They deserve, whether you live in not even name states, I don't want to offend anybody, but if you live in some of these states where maybe it's a little harder to get to, using this kind of an approach can really help you effectively communicate with more and more advisors.
Yeah, Jillian, I also think the implications for having that subject matter expert on your team and then being able to have a conversation with somebody in Spokane, Washington,
Yes.
and then, an hour later, go work with the team in New York City and then go close a big piece of business in Louisiana,
Yeah.
all through this type of communication. It being accepted now is really going to help these asset managers as they try to go out and grow their footprint.
Absolutely. And advisors, I mean, my experience is advisors really like it too. It's so much easier for them to have somebody kind of pop in and pop out quite quickly. And, there's still opportunity for small talk and for chatting, getting to know each other more so than when you do a conference call, but it's much more time efficient. And think about this is one thing we heard in the report, the ability to get subject matter experts, portfolio managers, investment consultants on these virtual meetings was way easier than getting someone to get on a plane and go to a city and do these meetings. You could get resources that you never could access before within your own firm to provide that value to the advisors as they were doing due diligence on products.
Yep. And so it's also impacting sales, and especially how it might affect the smaller firms. Is it going to give them an advantage that they did not have before COVID naturally? Or what are you seeing in terms of the adoption of digital sales?
Yeah, I think it is. And at FLX, we focus a lot on it. There's to have that, it's very difficult for smaller firms to achieve scale, right? And the resources that they need to effectively scale a distribution team that they're going to need to be effective. As I say, sales is about more than just putting a body up against something, right? It's so much more. It's about the tech stack that you need. It's about the resources, the research, you name it. There's so much more that goes along with just a person. That said, the ability to be more virtual does provide some scale to these organizations that are trying to effectively create a distribution solution. Do I think they can do it completely? One or two people still makes it quite challenging. You do need more scale from there, but the ability to be able to have someone on a desk or working from home or wherever that person may be, and be able to communicate that much more efficiently on a daily basis, because you can have you have a digital approach that's sort of email communications, social media communications, and then to have somebody who can go out there and effectively follow up on that and not have to be doing that in person becomes quite powerful. And it does provide scale where it probably hadn't existed before. There are obviously some firms are going to have more resources than others, but the ability to create that efficiency, I think, is going to be very valuable to some of these firms.
This episode of the Resilient Advisor Show is brought to you by the Independence Incubator.
Going independent is incredibly rewarding, but most advisors don't end up in the best place for their business. They instead end up getting sold by smooth-talking recruiters, custodian reps, or worst of all, aggregators who don't have their best interest in mind. The Independence Incubator from Resilient Advisor takes a fiduciary approach to independence. Our clients pay us directly for unbiased guidance on the best path for their business. Don't get sold, get educated, and get unbiased guidance. Visit independenceincubator.com to learn more. Yeah, so we're really fortunate with this show. It's got a big audience in the financial advisor community, and it's come through, over half a decade of just knuckle grinding out an audience. Nowadays, when I see an asset manager get into the marketplace and try to execute digital sales, I can tell, because I follow them, within about 6 months if they're going to fail or they're going to build a brand. If they bring the old school Gordon Gekko approach to digital, I'm going to put something on Facebook and cold call everybody, that doesn't work. If they're actively involved in managing their digital footprint and embracing channels where advisors are actually paying attention, they're getting results. And so I have to think that the advisors at these smaller RIAs that adopt that in their marketing approaches, they're seeing results. I'd have to think that the asset managers that are embracing that are going to get results as well.
Absolutely. There's so much about brand awareness, right? And, meeting the advisors where they are and where they want to be met. And that's just as much as what you're providing to them as where you are trying to raise the brand awareness. Where are they living? Where are they existing? Where are they going for their resources? And so there's a lot of platforms out there that are certainly helping that. It's so much more than just, an email campaign these days, right? It's where are you on social channels? What social channels are you on based on the product that you're selling? Are you on Twitter or LinkedIn or TikTok for that matter, based on what you're doing? As much as it pains me to say, we're marketing ETFs on TikTok, there's a reality of that. And what kinds of partners are you associating yourself with in order to effectively get that kind of scale and get that kind of exposure? So it's so much more about it, and the technology that exists to help you, even if it is an email campaign, what technology are you employing as a firm so that when you do have a lead, so when an advisor is clicking on something and expressing interest, that you can get that lead directly back so that advisor is getting immediate response and immediate service in response to their questions. So there's a whole host of things that just evolved so dramatically over the years.
Yeah. And I tell you, the biggest struggle I have with asset managers is getting their thought leaders to engage on social media.
Yeah.
And it's mind blowing because I will show them examples of other folks that have done it that are at firms much smaller than they are and the results and growth that they have seen. So once they get over that hurdle and they realize it's not that bad and that it actually gets results, they tend to embrace it a little bit more. What never works is when the chief investment officer says, I'm going to pay somebody to go do that for me. Or the guy who says, I want a big digital footprint, Jay, like you have. But, I don't want to be on Twitter. Well, that's fine, but that's where financial advisors are consuming content there today. Yeah.
Exactly. Especially as we think about more active ETFs coming into market, the ability for those CIOs and PMs, and they need to be out there, and they need to be, as I say sometimes, unapologetically active, right? And be out there and talking to advisors and talking about their stories. And it's just going to continue to get more and more important as the evolution of product development starts to change within ETFs.
One of the findings in your report I found interesting, and I think it applies to RIAs as well, and it's the idea of culture and the potential negative impacts of culture change at asset managers and inside of these RIAs that aren't getting together. What did your survey find?
Yeah, it's an interesting piece, and that was this idea of onboarding. And Flex has done this, right? We've basically built a virtual company during COVID, launched in December of 2019. Almost every employee has been onboarded virtually. And so the way to really build a culture and live that culture with never getting together in person. And I think it takes a lot of work. There were some firms that we talked to that found that there was not really much of an issue. They were some of the larger firms that had already been quite established. And yeah, they were onboarding people, but it wasn't a huge build in terms of personnel during COVID. That said, they still faced issues. And I think figuring out a way to demonstrate your culture regardless of where you are, and live that. A lot of people were creating sort of culture docs and living through that. Some were creating, at Flex, we call it Thirsty Thursdays, right? Where you're getting together virtually with people. I think we got a little bit exhausted from virtual happy hours, but ways to bring together your team and live the values and build that culture through a virtual medium. And I know it's not easy, but the way to do that through the technology that we had was really critical. So folks were setting up, onboarding buddies, for example, ways to partner up with other individuals from the firm that could live that culture and infuse that culture in new joiners to the organization. And then finding any opportunity you could to bring everybody together on a virtual meeting, if you could as well. But it was something that people were concerned about. I will say that it was more of a concern for others, again, based on the volume of hiring some of them were doing during the pandemic.
Another interesting finding from your study was that younger millennials don't have an interest generally in coming back to the office.
Yeah.
The ramifications of that are unbelievable. And I want to share my story. So I started in distribution over 2 decades ago. And the guy that I work for, who's still my mentor today, taught me everything I know, not by giving me a training manual or jumping on a Zoom. I was sitting there right next to him as we were making sales calls, doing presentations, learning from our mistakes. How are these younger folks that are getting into the industry going to get that same type of experience?
This is something that I thought a lot about, because I actually mentored through this, through Women in ETFs, which I'm on the board of. I was mentoring a young man who was an internal at an ETF company. And I think, and Jay, you can probably appreciate, like, as an internal, one of the most valuable things was being on a desk, right? And that momentum, and then how am I going to pick up the phone one more time, right? Because the guy or gal next to me is picking up the phone one more time, right? Make one more call, as we always used to say. And so I think that's really true. So I think there's 2 sides to this. So one, the ability to be flexible and hire outside of a geographic area, I think, does provide firms with the opportunity to bring in more talent, right? You're not constrained to a certain pool of talent. If you're open to people being remote, you can actually source a lot more talent, which I think is beneficial for the firms. That said, you have the issues like culture, and then, of course, as you mentioned, the ability to kind of be together. So as I was mentoring this young man, one of the things that we talked about was something that he did was he every single day throughout the day had regular cadence of meetings with his peers to talk to. So it wasn't just he was making sales calls to advisors. He was having regular catch-ups with his peers so they could motivate each other. What challenges were you facing? What were you talking about that day? They would kick off the day and end the day together as a team. And so for me, that felt like a really pretty effective in the confines of what we were working within, to be able to start your day and end your day with the people that you would be on the desk with in real life, to help each other stay motivated, because we all know it's incredibly difficult to do that. And so they were able to really find an effective way to stay in communication with each other while not being in the same room together.
Excellent. And I want to circle back to your role and involvement with women in ETFs. But first, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about FLX Distribution. I had your CEO, Brian Moran, on, gosh, it's probably about a year ago now, I think. I know a lot has changed. For folks that are not familiar with the organization, What do you do at Flex?
Yeah. So Flex is a resource and asset management platform. I think people are probably familiar with TAMPs, right? Turnkey asset management platforms. We consider ourselves the industry's first ramp. And we are, as you can see here, providing a set of core products. We are providing both resources and asset management products for the industry. We consider ourselves a marketplace that brings together financial advisors, wealth management home offices, and asset managers. And as I was mentioning earlier, I think if we think about, you mentioned that advisors are looking to find specific partners, right? And they're being more picky and choosy, as they should be, with who they're working with. The way that I think about it, the ability to come into an advisor's office and represent multiple ETF issuers or multiple vehicles, multiple asset managers is incredibly valuable. We understand that an advisor's time is valuable, and to be able to learn about and hear about a multitude of managers at the same time, we've heard, and we certainly have seen and experienced, is quite valuable. If I think about an advisor's time being as valuable as it is, being able to learn about those managers at once is certainly something that we believe they value. We're seeing the same thing with home offices. I mentioned earlier about scale, right? And ETF issuers and other asset managers needing to find scale. I think about Flex as being able to provide synthetic scale, right? With the ability to fractionally share your resources, you're able to create incredible scale for your business. I think a lot of firms don't think they're competing with, in the ETF industry, kind of the big three or these very large asset managers. But in reality, you are. You're competing with them, and you need to be able to compete with them on a scale perspective as well. And so through fractional sharing of resources, whether that be human capital, whether that be data, technology, you name it, we're able to provide that scale to these managers so they can effectively compete in the industry as well.
For podcast listeners, to learn more about Flex, please visit flxdst.com. That is flxdst.com. Jillian, let's wrap up with women in ETFs. I know you're very involved with it. Tell us about women in ETFs.
Women in ETFs is an organization that's near and dear to my heart. As one of the founding leaders in the organization, launching the Chicago chapter and current board member, served in a variety of different roles. It's an organization that was launched back, almost 8 years ago, in order to connect, support, and inspire women and men throughout the ETF industry. We are ones that we really pride ourselves on taking action, not just talking about making change in the industry, but actually taking action. Things like ringing the bell for gender diversity every year on International Women's Day, creating a speakers bureau that has largely become one of the most sought after in the ETF industry for effective speakers across the landscape of portfolio management, distribution, you name the topic. So we really believe that we have become the outlet for the ability to connect, support, and inspire members throughout the ecosystem. And certainly we have, in those 8 years, we have grown to 7,000 members around the world. We have 7 or 8 chapters in the US, Asia Pacific, Europe, and continuing to grow from there. So it's an incredible organization that I feel incredibly blessed to be a part of. Certainly encourage anybody that's interested in learning more to join or to visit womeninetfs.com. It's an amazing organization that, whether you are looking to get into the ETF industry or have been in the ETF industry for 20 years, it's a place that we believe, from an education perspective, we certainly have social events that we do, but it's always rooted in education. This industry is changing so rapidly. How do we continue to provide our members with education across a whole host of different topics, at the same time is allowing us to kind of come together and network and learn from each other, as again, we stand by our mission of connect, supporting, and inspiring.
Excellent. To learn more, the website is womeninetfs.com.
You got it.
Excellent. Jillian, I appreciate you coming on the show. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Jay.